Hello everybody! Today I want to talk to you about grading. This is an argument against giving zeros for missing assignments and the way teachers average their grades. If we look at it from a scientific standpoint, giving a zero or assigning a zero to a missing assignment and then averaging our grades is poor science. We've been doing bad science this entire time. Let me explain why. Let's take a hypothetical student. Let's say that this student on the first 3 assignments earns a 10 out of 10. Then they miss an assignment, which gives them a 0 out of 10. And then for their 5th assignment, they get an 8 out of 10. All right, so our grade books would average all of these and give this student a 38 out of 50. There was 50 total points. They got 38 points. They got a 38 out of 50. When we average that, that gives them a 76%. So the student would get a C in the class. But really, if we look at just the data that we've been given, if we look at what this student has turned in, we have 3 10s out of 10, and we have 1 8 out of 10, which really is 38 out of 40. So if we don't include that missing data, we now have a student that has 38 out of 40, which is a 95% in the class. If we look at just what this student has turned in, they're averaging a 95%. So here we have a student that averages A work, averages 95%, but because they missed an assignment, they now have a C in the class. Well, okay, we're all familiar with that. That's how teachers have been doing things. But now let's look at that in field work. How would that work in science in data collection? My graduate work, I studied tree squirrels. So let's talk about some tree squirrels. I did a lot of field work. So let's say that I go out into the field. And in my field area, in my area of study, there's 5 squirrels. My job is to catch these squirrels and weigh them. I'm only able to catch 4 of the squirrels. 3 of them weigh 1 pound exactly, and 1 of them weighs 0.8 or 0.8 of a pound. So I've weighed 4 of them. I couldn't catch the 5th one. If I took my data of these squirrels and I treated it the same way I'm treating my students, then I would say that that 5th squirrel, the missing squirrel, weighed 0 pounds. By taking a missing assignment and saying it's a 0, you are assuming that the student knew 0 amount of that information. I would never assume that the 5th squirrel weighed 0 pounds. But if I did, let's average it. So I have 3 squirrels that weigh 1 pound. I have 1 squirrel that weighs 0.8 of a pound or 0.8 pounds. And I have a 5th squirrel missing. So if I gave that 5th squirrel a 0 and I average all these up, I would get 0.76 pounds or 76/100ths of a pound. And that would be my average. Now that would be bad data. That would be bad science because I'm now saying that the average weight of squirrels in that area is 0.76 pounds. And that's not true. I never caught a squirrel that weighed under 0.8 pounds, right? So my average is incorrect. It is not helpful. Now, if I only took the 4 data sets I have and averaged those, then I would say that the average weight of squirrels in that area is 0.95 pounds or 95/100ths of a pound, which is pretty good data, right? Because 3 of those squirrels weighed a pound and 1 of them weighed 0.8 of a pound. And so by saying the average weight is 0.95 pounds, that really does give us an idea of the average weight of squirrels in that area. And that's what we do in data collection. If we don't have a data set, we ignore it. So I was supposed to weigh 5 squirrels, I weighed 4. I ignore that 5th one and I average the 4 that I have, and that gives me an accurate description of those squirrels. So now we look at this student again, the student who's turned in A work 4 times out of 5, that 5th data is just missing. We have an A student, but yet we factor in a 0, which makes them a C student. So is that C an accurate description of that student's work? No, and again, this is just poor science. So why do we do it? Why do we give students a 0 for missing work? Well, part of it is punitive. we're punishing them. If a student didn't do an assignment I gave them, they should get a 0 to punish them. They chose not to do something that I thought was valuable, so they get a 0. But again, that's not good data collection, and that's not an accurate description of that student. That student is an A student. They've turned in work that averages 95%, and at the end, I give them a C because they missed something. So I am suggesting that giving a 0 for missing work is bad science. I'm suggesting that it's an inaccurate way to portray students' grades. Now let's be the devil's advocate. I've talked to other teachers and they've said, well, what if we have a student that hardly turns anything in? Should we average the grades that we do have at the end? And let's look at an example. Let's say that we have a student who turns in a 10 out of 10 assignment, they miss the next 3 assignments, and then they turn in an 8 out of 10. So they've only done 2 out of the 5 assignments. And if we look at their score, this is an 18 out of 50, which is 36%. They have failed this class. But if we just take the 18 out of 20, which is what we have from the student, they now have a B in the class, an 80% in the class. That's a huge difference, an F or a B. So what does this student get? Well, in science, what we would do is say, we don't have enough data to accurately give a description of this student. And that happens. If I was supposed to weigh 5 squirrels and I only weighed 2 out of 5, I would say I do not have enough data to provide an accurate description of the weight of those squirrels. And in this case, I do not have enough data to accurately describe the performance or the knowledge of this student. It's okay to say that. So now we have to look at our classrooms and say, how much data is necessary to give an accurate description of this student? Do I have enough or do I not? And what happens if you don't have enough data to accurately describe this student? Well, then you're gonna have to get some more data. So there's gonna be situations where you can't let a student not turn something in. You have to push. You have to try and fight to get that data from that student so you can give an accurate description. Allowing students to miss assignments and get a 0 does not help anybody. It doesn't give us an accurate information. And so we need to figure out ways to prevent these zeros or these missing assignments. I have heard the argument that giving a student a 0 for a missing assignment is an incentive for them not to miss assignments. And so again, it's punitive. Well, modern psychology has taught us that punishment is not a good motivator. What we want in education is intrinsic motivation to learn. Punishing them with grades, punishing students with grades is not going to give us the learning outcomes that we want in education. We can't look at grades as a type of punishment. And we can't look at averaging zeros because then that's bad science. So we have to figure out other ways to do this. Overall, think of it this way. That student that turned in 4 assignments, averaging a 95%, and missed one, and you give them a 0, you are saying that that student knew 0% of that information, which is probably unlikely. It's very unlikely that they knew 0%, and that's why giving a 0 on a missing assignment is inaccurate. So then I've heard teachers say, well, if I have nothing from that student, I have nothing to enter, so it goes in as a 0. Well, entering a 0 is not entering nothing. Entering a 0 is giving it a score. You scored something that you don't have. You say that that assignment earned a 0. That's a score. If you were to accurately say that by not having something, I have nothing to score, then you wouldn't include it into the average. And if by not including it into the average, you no longer have enough data to accurately describe this student, then you need to do what you can to collect more data. Otherwise, you don't have a description of this student. I hope this gave you students and teachers something to think about. I want us to stop continuing the practice of bad science. I'll see you guys next time.